Jim Stewart back at you with topic number 9. It's called Back to Black Reconstruction, Getting Away from Slavery, 1865 to 1945. Title tells you that we're circling back to the world of Thomas Nast, remember, the cartoonist in the early showings that we were doing here, and the whole question of what black people can make of their freedom, given the fact that there are forces around them and people around them who want to make sure that that freedom is as tiny and small, as infinitesimal as possible, while their hopes are for nothing impeding their freedom. And freedom means also rights, and rights mean equality. So we're back to 1865, and we're taking a look at the Deep South again, and what I'm talking about today will extend itself all the way to 1945, and the topic is sharecropping. When we think about sharecropping, the first thing that you think about is the same thing that you thought about when you were thinking about plantations, and that's cotton. And you can see from these two pictures on the screen here that it looks an awful lot like enslaved people standing in a cotton field doing what they had been forced to do habitually for generation after generation before emancipation, which is tending and picking it. White guys supervising, big bags, people working hard. Seems like slavery, but it's not. This is not Mississippi in 1850. This is Mississippi in 1880. The people that you see in front of you are free people. Hypothetically, the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment to the Constitution that was passed between 1868 and 1870 guaranteed the people that you're looking at equal rights with everybody else in the United States. But you can tell just by looking at them that the overtones of enslavement are really, really strong here. But, and this is the point that's really worth mentioning here, what you're seeing are people who have made a bargain that allows their margin of freedom to be protected against the master remaining, because the master is right there. Now, this is a big problem for a lot of different reasons. First of all, cotton isn't edible. All you can do is turn it into something else, clothing, and cotton is basically like the polyester of the 19th century, something that makes cheap clothing for people once you do other stuff to it. Because it's not edible, the people who pick it have to be able to have a way to feed, clothe, house, and maintain themselves. And what you're seeing here is the methods that are devised as a contract between the guy who owns the land and wants the cotton picked and the people who are working the land and doing the picking that allows freed African Americans the discretion and the time to feed, clothe, and house themselves. It's called sharecropping. Looks like slavery, but it's not slavery. What it is a form of agriculture that any peasant would know. And it's not bad to say people are peasants. Peasants are smart people. Peasants know lots of things about the countryside, lots of things about wildlife, lots of things about medicine, lots of things about animals, lots of things about ways to survive that you and I sitting in our living rooms have forgotten about a long, long time ago. The deal goes something like this, and there's always a lot of trickery and a lot of bargaining and a lot of negotiation, which could never have been done in slavery. Instead of negotiating, you'd whip somebody or somehow force them into laboring. Now you got to negotiate. The negotiation says, all right, we're going to do this amount of land this year. We expect to be able to raise a crop that looks like that. When we sell it, we're going to, I hope, make this much from it. What I'm going to do now is, black family, advance you in anticipation of the profit being made on this crop later on, what you need in order to be able to get along for this year while you work for me. We'll have a share of the profits between us, and you'll get your anticipated yield early. What this is not slavery, it's a negotiation. It's a negotiation between unequals, but it's also a negotiation where if you're at a disadvantage, you try and get advantages. Can you see how different this relationship is than slavery? Can you see how, in a lot of ways, the master, who is normally accustomed to being obeyed, is now having to figure out what the other person's negotiating position is? That creates, in the Deep South, in quote unquote race relations, a tremendous amount of anxiety, a tremendous amount of volatility. So sharecropping is a way for African American people to get away from slavery. And this is a form of labor that will continue in the South, in the deep cotton states, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, East Texas, Mississippi, South Carolina, certain parts of North Carolina, all the way up to the end of World War II. The vast majority of emancipated people are really people that are nailed to the land. They're dependent on the crop, but they're dependent on the crop in a way that gives them autonomy and a way that makes it harder for white people to feel that they can be naturally in charge. The lynching part is something that comes directly along with this bargaining and loss of assumed white control that you see in the sharecropping system. What you're seeing here is the law of gravity being negotiated and at the same time reapplied in new and more violent ways to reassert boundaries of white control that had been taken away when the master-slave relationship went away. The 14th Amendment guarantees nationalized citizenship. That means assembly, right to bear arms, all the different things that go with the Bill of Rights. And the 15th Amendment says African Americans, along with white people, if they're male, can vote. That's the theory. You can see that's not the practice. The law of gravity is being applied in new ways because old ways of applying it no longer work. So that's what getting away from slavery feels like for African American people. What we need to understand is that we've abolished slavery, the master remains, the negotiations are unequal, the violence is the substitute for the master-slave relationship. See you next time.